Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squared for boxing news and views from around the internet. The former WBO champion Joseph Parker is open to a fight with Michael Hunter. When called out by Hunter, who says, as you can see here on screen, let's dance, Parker says, no problem. 100 since Joe Joyce Boxing don't want £1.2 million. And no, that siren in the back isn't calling BS on Joseph Parker. He said this. Whether the fight actually happens, though, is another question. So how did all this come about? Well, in earlier messages, there was a post from Sky Sports Boxing. You can see here them posting, remembering Parker had actually just recently signed with them and with the promotional outfit Boxer. Smoke for hire. Joseph Parker is ready and waiting for a heavyweight rival to step up. Hunter says, my team let Boxer know I was up for it. And Joseph Parker saying, you're looked in to fight Huey, as in Huey Fury. They would have been fighting this weekend. Fury pulled out due to some medical issues. Unclear when it's going to be rescheduled for, but Hunter is saying that's not a barrier at this point. Remembering, Michael Hunter has just been upgraded to number 1 in the WBA rankings. But that doesn't necessarily mean too much with the WBA, given the myriad of belts and sort of tie-ups and bits and pieces. But it also doesn't mean that just because he's number 1 that Joseph Parker will fight him. Because Joe Joyce was number 1, that fight's not happening. Filip Hrgović was the mandatory challenger in the IBF, not happening. Parker was dropped out of the IBF rankings as a result. And it's hard not to mention fights and negotiations being difficult with Joseph Parker, because obviously he's been very open, and his team, and for years. And I don't want people saying this isn't the case. Even Parker has said the deals have got to make sense. Hence the reason the Hrgović fight didn't happen. So if a fight with Hrgović can't happen, how's the fight with Michael Hunter going to happen? And there's a few things related to that I think it's worth stepping through, because there's a lot of noise at the moment from Joseph Parker about fights, but we haven't seen anything actually happening. What we have seen is Parker walk away from a deal with Joe Joyce to sign with Sky and Boxer, and then try to make a deal with Joe Joyce to come fight on Sky. And obviously Frank Warren said, no, that's not going to happen. There's a lot of people on both sides of the Joe Joyce-Joseph Parker fight saying, one is ducking the other. And I'm sure people have got their views. But it's become very apparent for some considerable time that it's tough to negotiate with Joseph Parker and his team. David Higgins, who used to promote him, is now his manager and advisor. And Joseph Parker has formed for this sort of stuff on social media in the past, calling out fighters, and stuff doesn't happen. And why is that? Well, for a large part, it's money. And I think this sort of fight, and this is legitimately two guys who are, top 10, Hunter sort of towards the back end, or maybe even just outside, given one or two recent performances, but still, he's a good contender, and Joseph Parker is a top 10 contender. It's a good fight. And let's face it, at the moment, what's Joseph Parker going to do on Sky with Boxer? It's a question. If Dillian White is, and this is what we're hearing, he may want to tune up before he steps into a big fight, well, what's Joseph Parker doing the rest of 2022? If it's not Joe Joyce now, what's happening? Some names like Otto Varlin, also Jermaine Franklin, Lucas Brown have popped up. I mean, some of those fights have got some sort of limited appeal. Lucas Brown one, not so much. Michael Hunter, I think, is probably the best out of all those different names. But because you have form with Parker being so difficult and notorious to negotiate with, I'm just not sure it's going to happen. If he's saying before an offer's even made from Filip Hrgović, the offer's not there, it's not enough money, it's got to make sense on all fronts, what's going to happen with Hunter, who has no real fan base to speak of? He's got some fans, but he doesn't have a massive fan base. That's just a fact. He doesn't really have anything to bring to the table. He doesn't have some sort of mandatory to take. That's not to say that something like this couldn't have a mandatory on the line, but if Parker is blowing off Hrgović, can't get a deal done with Joyce for what would have been the WBO mandatory, a mandatory slot is not necessarily going to be the be-all and end-all for Team Parker. And I had actually said and this is on Twitter, my response, I love that potential fight, but will there be the deal wasn't right down the track? And that's the thing with Joseph Parker. Sometimes these comments get made. I don't believe he's scared of any of these guys or anything like that. I think he does want to fight these guys, but financially, everything has to add up. And that whole sort of, as I quoted before, it all has to make sense. That was from Parker of the Filip Hrgovic fight. And the reason, he was sort of citing, a few different sort of body ailments, but also that he didn't get a good offer and that it all has to make sense. And that includes the financial aspects. And actually someone sort of pulled me up on another tweet that I'd made regarding that smoke for hire post. Because I said, because of that tweet where it was Joseph Parker ready and waiting for a heavyweight rival to step up, I said, does it come with an asterisk, right? That being the money and the deal has to be right per the Team Parker ethos. Because they are just so open and it's flagrant. And if you don't believe me, well, we've just had another example of it. Didn't like the deal with Joe Joyce, so walked away, signed for more money with with Sky Sports Boxing and Boxer XX. And that's the thing. People want to have it both ways and say, oh, well, he's entitled to more money. He's entitled to a better deal. But if it comes to they're on the same side of the street and now Parker's the A side and then says there's not enough money in that fight to get it done, well, clearly it's just about money rather than anything else. And this is kind of what it's all been about for, a lot of fights that haven't happened for Joseph Parker over his career. More recently, Joe Joyce being the best example. So, you can't begrudge Parker for wanting the most money. It's a brutal sport. You want to get in and get out. And he's, got over 10 million New Zealand dollars in terms of purses and all that sort of stuff. So he's done exceedingly well and still looking to clip the ticket and get those big paydays. But if he's turning down an IBF mandatory, turning down a WBO potential mandatory with Joe Joyce, Michael Hunter, with no real fan base to speak of, he doesn't bring a lot of money to the table. I wouldn't have thought so. What is the lure for the casual UK fan for Joseph Parker versus Michael Hunter in the UK? You can't put that on pay-per-view. No one's going to convince me otherwise. That would absolutely bomb. So what's it going to be? Is it going to be some expensive fight night? And in that case, the amount of dollar signs is going to be dropping. It'll be lower than Joseph Parker and that want. At the end of the day, they want to be on that pay-per-view platform against a United Kingdom heavyweight because that's where the money is. And this is why they've gone to Sky and Boxer. This is why they've gone to the biggest platform for the bigger fights that bring in the most money. It's kind of as simple as that. So while I like this fight in terms of Michael Hunter, how realistic is it? Be real. I know some people are getting at me and sort of saying, like that guy who commented to me on Twitter saying, let's not take the piss out of Joe Boxer Parker for making money choices. I'm absolutely not. I'm just being real. How is stating the obvious that he's going to want the most money and that the money side of it could actually be a hindrance to that fight getting made? How is that actually taking the piss? And as I said, and I'll recap that, how is it taking the piss? Parker and his team have previously been very open about getting the most dollars, making sense on all fronts. That's a direct Parker quote. Hunter, no belt, small fan base, not from the UK, so not a pay-per-view opponent for UK audience. Make it make sense. Does it make sense? And if Hunter isn't that opponent that can drag in eyeballs and money for the purses, is Parker actually going to be fighting him? Make it make sense. Drop a comment, loud and often, hit like, hit subscribe, follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.